covenant. He is in the grave 3 days and 3 nights. He is raised on the weekly Sabbath. That's why when the women came to the grave early the first day of the week, was his Yom HaBikurim, the day of the first fruits, it was still dark and he was already gone. When did he get up? On the 4th night? No, the 3rd day on the Sabbath. When he arose, those saints in the grave, whose graves were marked when the earth quaked and the rocks rent and the graves were open, and when he arose, they arose and appeared to many in the streets of Jerusalem. They are up at the time of the harvest of the first fruits, and then, as the priest then processed the first fruits of the barley in the temple through the night, and the high priest, who must be in seclusion during this period of time, from when the Passover lamb was sacrificed until the first fruit offering was made, then Yeshua, having been raised from the dead on Shabbat, the next morning when Miriam comes to the grave, it's still dark, she thinks he's the gardener and says, "Sir, where have you taken the body, my Lord? Where have you put him?" He said, "Mary." She rushes at him to grab him by the feet. He says back, he says, "Don't touch me. I've not yet ascended to my Father in heaven." Then he said, "Go tell my disciples that I now ascend to my Father and their Father, to my God and their God, and then to meet me in the Galilee." Where is he going? To present the first fruits that were in the grave before the Father's throne in heaven, and is back on the earth to intercept the other women who come later with the burial spices, who meet the angel and are sent back to tell the disciples the same thing: he's gone. Yeshua meets them on the road. He says, "Yehovah saves you," ancient Hebrew Matthew, and they hold him by the feet now, because he's already returned from his priestly duties as the Kohen Gadol forever. Now, in the midst of the week, Yeshua literally is the fulfillment of all the sacrifices that were done. Remember, at Mount Sinai, Moses went up into the mountain. While he was gone, we built a golden calf. After entering into a blood covenant, in which Moses spent all day sprinkling us all with blood, the scroll, the altar, everything was sprinkled with blood, then we were under a blood covenant. Whoever breaks the blood covenant dies. If Israel breaks the blood covenant, they die. If the Almighty breaks his covenant with Israel, he dies. Moses goes up to the mountain, receives the 10 commandments in stone, comes back down. The Almighty says, "Stand back, I'm going to kill them all. I'll start over with you." Moses says, "Figure something else out. You ain't starting over with me." The Almighty had to listen to him. He figures something else out. And as Hebrews says, that the sacrifices were instituted because of transgression. The blood of bulls and goats and lambs and rams can't take away sin. They're a constant reminder the death penalty is owed. Year after year, feast after feast. And then Yeshua, who never broke the covenant, died in the place of the guilty party so he can renew the covenant with us. That's what the renewed covenant in his blood is all about. Now we can be priests and kings because he has renewed the covenant with us. But what happened? Because the overspreading of transgressions in Israel among the priests, the religious leaders, he made those sacrifices desolate on that level. That year, for the first time, and for the next 40 years, the Yom Kippur sacrifice, in which the scapegoat was taken out of the wilderness, pushed off, but yet the red cord that was around his neck put over the hekel, the door of the temple, when that scapegoat was pushed off, every year that scarlet cord turned snow white. It was a miracle that was put in place by revelation that went on for hundreds of years. But the rabbis all acknowledge and have to admit that 28 of the Common Era, when Yeshua was crucified, that scarlet ribbon never turned white again. That is why the rabbis come up with what has replaced the sacrifices, because even before the temple was destroyed, 40 years before, it was shown that the Almighty was no longer accepting the Yom Kippur sacrifice. Why? The Messiah, once he had paid the price, sat down at the right hand of the Almighty. Yeshua said the temple was going to be destroyed. He said it. Who destroyed it? Did Rome destroy the temple? No. The Almighty destroyed the temple. You don't think Rome is going to get away with doing something the Almighty has not ordained. You don't think that Nebuchadnezzar is going to get away with something the Almighty has not ordained. He calls Nebuchadnezzar my servant because he did what the Almighty said must come to pass. You transgress me, you're paying the price. He doesn't change. But he, the Messiah, wait, back here. 62 weeks, triumphal entry, the last day of the second week. 1 week, he's cut off in the midst of the week. 3 days and 3 nights in the grave. The next day begins the 64th week, but it's not the 64th week. It's the first day of the counting of the Omer. It is Yom HaBikurim. Now we count the 7 sevens. And then the day after is the fulfillment, Shavuot. 62 sevens. After 62 sevens, 1 7. In the midst of the 7, he's cut off. 3 days and 3 nights, now 7 sevens. It's all there, ladies and gentlemen. That's the third layer. And so you have to read this understanding now that there is more than one layer on this. And he who confirms the covenant is speaking of the Messiah, whose blood anoints the most holy. In that, he makes reconciliation for iniquity. He makes an end of sins, or the result of sin. The violation of Torah is sin. And what Yeshua did, the curse of violating the Torah is what? Death. Yeshua made an end to sins in this way, in that he paid the death penalty for the violation of the Torah. Do you see anything in here about the Antichrist making a land deal with Israel? No, it just isn't there, people. Now, let's look at it on another level. Because you can say that in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate even unto the consummation. Because when this is all ended, then is going to be restored. There will be sacrifices in the millennial reign of the Messiah. If these nations don't come up and worship the King Yehovah Tzevaot, it's not going to rain on them for a whole year. You know, these things are temporarily done away with and suspended. And what do the rabbis say? Prayers, good works, and offerings, that is what replaces the temple service. What do we say? Yeshua replaced the animal sacrifice because they were just a placeholder until the death penalty was paid. Now, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people. Now let's see what happened in history. According to Ezra chapter 7, Aviv 1 of the 7th year of the reign of Artaxerxes, which was 457 BC, that is when the commandment went forth for Israel to go forth and rebuild Jerusalem. This is the declaration that is repeated in Ezra chapter 7. It gives us the date, Aviv 1, the first day of the first month in the 7th year of his reign. And we know when the 7th year of his reign is because we know when Xerxes died within 2 days, because of how they marked the courses on the heavenly bodies. And so we can go back, and within 2 days, we can find out when his father died. Now it comes around to his coronation year. Then 7 years later, Aviv 1, 457 BC. What happens 7 years from then? That is Zerubbabel's temple. The walls rebuilt. The temple is rebuilt. In troublous times, Sanballat, all those up there in Samaria, they're coming against them. Yet Ezra, Nehemiah stand strong, and Zerubbabel's temple is built, not by night, not by power, but by his spirit. It is accomplished. 7 sevens. Now you go 62 more sevens, and what do we come to? For a total of 69 sevens, we come to Aviv 1, 27 of the Common Era. That is when Yeshua walked out of the wilderness on that day, Yohanan ben Zechariah said, "Behold the Lamb of God, which takes away the sin of the world. This is the one that I told you about 41 days earlier. This is the one whom I saw the Spirit in the form of a dove descend upon him and remain upon him. This is the Son of God. This is the one of whom I heard the voice say, 'This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased.'" This is a record in the 2nd chapter of the Gospel of John. 1st and 2nd chapter. And it was on Aviv 1, 27 of the Common Era, exactly 483 years to the day that the commandment to go forth and build Jerusalem took place. We've got 7 sevens. We've got 62 sevens. What's left? And he, the Messiah, will confirm the covenant with many for 1 7. Now this is where Eusebius wanted to come up with this has already all been fulfilled. And now the Pope, who is Constantine, who has named himself the Pontifex Maximus, which is the title of the high priest of paganism, the vicar of Christ, the instead of Christ, or in Latin, against Christ, Antichrist, proclaims that he is instead of the Messiah ruling from his millennial throne in Rome. That's why the Pope is trying to make the grab for more than 200 holy sites and to take over the Temple Mount. Because this messenger of Satan, this enemy of all that is righteous and holy, the unholy see, is making his play. Messiah will confirm the covenant for 1 7. And when he opens the eyes of Judah, at the culmination of this war, that there is no way that Israel will be able to survive. There's no place to run. There's no place to hide. And as the now deceased rabbi who was in charge of the Holocaust chamber on Mount Zion told me years and years ago, look around you in Jerusalem and in Israel today. In a few years, 2/3 of the people you see will be dead. Why? We have still refused to come back to the Torah. And the prophets tell us what is going to happen. Israel is going to be brought to the brink of destruction, and the Almighty is going to fight for Israel, but not without great bloodshed. At the culmination of this war, which I believe the ultimate where this will start is on Tishri 1. For 10 days, the 10 days of awe, it'll look like there's no hope. But on the holiest day of the year, the day that was set aside for the approaching of the Ark of the Covenant, is when the Almighty will fight from heaven, and the confirmation of the covenant in Yeshua's blood will be brought forth, and they will look on him of whom they have pierced. They will weep and they will wail as one weeps and wails for the death of their only son. They will understand that Yeshua is the Messiah. He was the prophet that they were supposed to hear and obey, but they didn't. He is the prophet that the Christians are supposed to hear and obey, but they don't. He is the prophet that nobody wants to listen to because they've got their own God-damned religion to protect. But he will have his way. He will shake the earth in the last days to deliver the sheep from the false shepherds. And they will hear his voice, and they will follow him. What transpires at the end of this war, in which the sun is darkened, the moon is turned to blood, and an army that before them it's a Garden of Eden, behind them it is a desolate wasteland, that the Almighty fights for Israel, and then he will pour out his Spirit upon all flesh. Sons and daughters will prophesy. Young men will dream dreams, old men dream dreams. Visions. The double portion of the Holy Spirit will be poured out upon those who stand and do what they have been called to do. Ladies and gentlemen, get ready for the confirmation of the covenant. I would like to pray. Abba, Father, thank you for this time that we have had to delve into the depth of your word. We thank you for your revelation, Yeshua. You said that you would work in us, you would do things, miraculous things that we would not even be able to comprehend. And now we see that you have worked so many things together so that we understand. And here we are at this point in time in which the world is shaking around us, and we know that you are in complete control. Take our lives and use us in your service all the days of our life, and may we hear the words on the sea of fire and glass. Good job, well done, faithful servant. Amen and amen. Shalom, Torah fans. I will see you on the sea of fire and glass when the smoke clears.